The year 11. After Hijrah did not just mark the passing of a prophet, it marked the beginning of a trial that would decide if Islam was a permanent truth or a fleeting moment in history. Medina, once the vibrant heart of the revelation, had become a fortress of silence. Outside its walls, the horizon was glowing with the fires of 1,000 rebellions. This was the Ridda, the great apostasy. It was not merely a political revolt, it was a spiritual earthquake. Tribal leaders across the peninsula, from the heights of Najd to the coasts of Oman, were tearing up their treaties. They whispered in their tents that the contract of heaven had expired with the death of Muhammad. They refused the zakat, claiming it was a tax paid only to a living prophet. They silenced the adhan, replacing the call to prayer with the ancient, jagged war cries of tribal pride. Abu Bakr al-Siddiq stood at the center of this gathering storm, a man whose physical frailty belied a spirit made of tempered steel. He knew that the Ummah was standing on the edge of a precipice. One wrong move, one moment of hesitation, and the light of Islam would be snuffed out forever. In the small, dim room of the Caliph, a masterclass in grand strategy was being written in the shadows. The Sahaba, warriors like Umar ibn al-Khattab and Ali ibn Abi Talib, were men of immense courage, yet even they felt the weight of the impossible. They urged the Caliph to pull back, to consolidate their few remaining swords, and to defend Medina at all costs. They saw the thousands of rebels gathered at their gates and feared that the city of the Prophet would become his followers' graveyard. But Abu Bakr saw what they did not. He understood that in the desert, defense is an admission of weakness. If Medina stayed behind its walls, the rebels would unite into a single, crushing wave. He decided, against all conventional military wisdom, to attack. He would not send one army. He would send 11. This was the birth of the 11 banners, a logistical feat that remains unparalleled in the annals of early warfare. 11 separate commands, 11 distinct targets, all coordinated by a single mind in a mud-brick room. He was choosing to strike every nerve ending of the rebellion at once, forcing the apostates to defend their own lands rather than marching on Medina. These were not just soldiers, they were the banners of the Siddiq. Each commander was hand-picked for his specific temperament and tribal knowledge. To the legendary Khalid ibn al-Walid, he gave the most brutal task, the suppression of Tulayha in the north. To Ikrimah ibn Abi Jahl, the son of the Prophet's greatest enemy turned devoted believer, he gave the mission to the south. To Amr ibn al-As and Shurahbil ibn Hassana, he gave the borders. Before they rode, Abu Bakr stood before them, not as a king giving orders, but as a guardian of a sacred trust. His instructions, recorded by Ibn Kathir, were precise. Do not kill a woman or a child or an elderly person. Do not cut down a tree. Do not destroy a building. This was a war of restoration, not destruction. He commanded them to offer the rebels a chance to return to the Salah and the Zakat first. The call to prayer was to be their first weapon. The sword was to be the last. As the sun broke over the dunes, the 11 commanders mounted their steeds. The thunder of 44 hooves began a rhythm that would soon shake the entire peninsula. The darkest hour had met its master. To save a faith from fire, one must sometimes employ a flame that is hotter than the rebellion itself. Of the 11 banners Abu Bakr al-Siddiq prepared, the first and most formidable was reserved for a man whose name struck a singular, sharp fear. That man was Khalid ibn al-Walid. But the selection of Khalid was not a simple military appointment. It was a profound testament to the Siddiq's wisdom. Only years prior, Khalid had been the tactical genius who broke the Muslim lines at Uhud. He was a man born of war. He possessed a mind that saw a battlefield not as a place of chaos, but as a chessboard of geometry and timing. When he embraced Islam, the Prophet had bestowed upon him a title that would follow him into eternity. Saifullah, the sword of Allah. Yet as the Ridda began, some in Medina questioned if this sword was too sharp. Abu Bakr, however, saw what others missed. He knew that against the savage brutality of the false prophets, the Ummah needed a commander who did not know retreat. The mission Abu Bakr handed to Khalid was the most perilous on the map. He was ordered to march north, into the heart of the rebellion. led by Tulayha al-Asadi, a man who claimed prophecy. This was not a border skirmish, it was a collision of two worlds. Abu Bakr's instructions to Khalid were recorded as a masterpiece of trust and discipline. He gave him a wide mandate. He told him to be a mercy to those who repented, but a storm to those who persisted in treason. In the quiet of the night before the march, the Caliph and the general stood together. One was spiritual gentleness, the other military lethality. It was this balance that provided the Ummah its first real hope. Khalid did not just carry a banner, he carried a reputation. The reputation of a man who had never lost a battle. He was preparing to redefine the art of desert warfare forever. As the first rays of the sun hit the black silk of Khalid's banner, the primary column began its journey. Behind Khalid rode the veterans of Badr and the heroes of the trench, men who had seen the face of death and did not blink. Abu Bakr watched from the outskirts of the city, his lips moving in silent prayer. He had sent his best weapon into the mouth of the beast. The strategy was now in motion. Khalid was the spearhead, the force that would break the back of the northern rebellion. The air in the peninsula was changing. The scent of rebellion was being replaced by the dust of an advancing justice. The false prophets in their distant camps began to hear the rumors that the sword of Allah had been unsheathed once more. The first strike of the great reconquest was about to land, and the echoes of it would be felt for 1,000 years. The road to Buzakha was not paved with glory, it was paved with the cold, hard reality of a fractured world. As Khalid ibn al-Walid led the primary column of the 11 banners northward, the very earth seemed to tremble under the weight of the coming confrontation. This was the first true test of the Siddiq's resolve. Standing against them was Tulayha al-Asadi, a man who had once been a companion, but who now claimed that the angel Gabriel had descended upon him with a new message, a message that conveniently abolished the zakat and the prostrations of prayer. Tulayha was no minor rebel. He had the backing of the mighty Banu Asad and the fierce Ghatafan tribes. He had positioned his forces at the wells of Buzakha, a strategic crossroads in the heart of the Najd. He knew that if he could break Khalid here, the road to Medina would be wide open, and the Caliphate of Abu Bakr would be nothing more than a footnote in history. The stakes were absolute. This was not just a battle for territory. It was a battle for the very definition of truth in the Arabian Peninsula. Khalid ibn al-Walid arrived at the outskirts of Buzakha not as a conqueror, but as a master of psychological warfare. He knew that the tribes following Tulayha were bound by pride, not by faith. He spent days scouting the terrain, his silhouette a constant, haunting presence on the surrounding ridges. He understood that to win, he had to shatter the illusion of Tulayha's prophecy. The battle began with a ferocity that defied description. The air turned black with arrows and the red dust of the Najd. Khalid, leading from the front as always, pushed his cavalry into the heart of the Ghatafan lines. He was a whirlwind of precision, his movements so fast and calculated that the rebels began to whisper that he was possessed by something beyond the human. But the true turning point was not found in the strength of arms, but in the collapse of a lie. As the battle raged, Tulayha sat in a tent, wrapped in a cloak, claiming he was receiving revelation. When his chief commander, Uyayna ibn Hisn, rushed to him demanding to know what Gabriel had said, Tulayha's desperate, incoherent response revealed the fraud. The prophet was exposed. The Ghatafan warriors realized they were dying for a man who was hallucinating in a tent. The retreat turned into a rout. Tulayha, seeing his army shatter, fled into the desert toward Syria, leaving his followers to face the justice of the sword of Allah. Khalid did not just win a battle at Buzakha, he performed a spiritual surgery on the peninsula. By breaking Tulayha, he sent a message that vibrated through every rebel camp in Arabia. The Siddiq would not be defied, and his commanders would not be stopped. Abu Bakr, receiving the news in Medina, did not celebrate with vanity. He fell into prostration. The first and most dangerous thread of the rebellion had been cut. Buzakha was the proof that the strategy of the 11 banners was working. The momentum had shifted. The fear that had gripped Medina was now being exported to the enemies of Islam. But while the north was beginning to stabilize, a far darker and more powerful fire was rising in the east, in the region of Yamama. There, a false prophet far more dangerous than Tulayha was gathering 40,000 warriors. The sword of Allah had won his first victory, but his greatest trial was still waiting in the blood-soaked valley of death.